And this is the third session of building a relational culture at St. Andrew. And building a relational culture, how can we help people find their passions for ministry? And, okay. Goals are to help move St. Andrew toward a relational culture, introduce practices that assist that process, and deepen relationships between members of our community. What to expect each week. March 9th, March 16th, March 23rd, refining our... Louder? Okay. What?
We're just excited because that's today.
Oh, okay.
Good,
Okay.
good. I like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, today is March 23rd, and this one is refining our skills. And then March 30th, building power to work for good. And April 6th, what does this mean for St. Andrew? So, a relational meeting is, a relational meeting is not. Intentional, not a social chit-chat. Now, what do we mean by chit-chat?
What you do in the narthex after church? So,
Okay.
So you know how you go out in the narthex after church and you say, "Hi, how are you? Where are you from? What do you do?" That's social chit chat. That's the what questions. A relational meeting is more the why questions, and so we don't have a lot of those in the narthex after church. We don't often get to people's deep-seated what really energizes them and what keeps them up at night. Although sometimes we do. Current times, you know, a lot of us are up at night. So, but yeah, it's think of it as going deeper rather than horizontal.
Mutual conversation, not an interview, and you can see when you start doing these one-to-ones, it can turn into an interview. So you got to monitor that. Focus on stories. Why? Not on information. What? Time limited.
This is the one I have a hard time with, but I try. It's important to try, and in fact, at the beginning of a one-to-one meeting, it's really helpful if you say, "Thank you for meeting with me. Do you still have 45 minutes to spend? Is that still going to work?" And then try your best. And then at the end of the 45 minutes, then it's okay to say, "I'm really enjoying this conversation. Can we go a little longer? How much time do you have?" So it's okay. But, you know, I go out for coffee with my friends, and it's 3 hours later, and I come home. So that's a tough one for me.
Not endless. Art and practice, and not technique.
So in other words, it's something that you practice, and there's no manual for it, really. I mean, there are tips, there are hints, there are guidelines that follow good practices for doing this. But at the end of the day, it's not a cause and effect. It's not a script. It's not, I say this and then they say this. Okay, so it's something that really requires a lot of practice.
So we had a homework assignment last week to do one-to-ones.
It was a challenge. If you didn't do your homework, don't worry. You're still okay.
So did anybody do one?
Go to the next slide.
Okay.
Yeah, keep going.
Mm-hmm.
Keep going.
Okay. I was nervous about making the request.
These are some comments that we often hear from people who are doing one-to-ones, especially for the first time.
Okay. I learned a lot about someone else. I found myself dreading it until it happened. We ran out of time. So did any of that happen? Okay. I learned some things about myself. The other person seemed genuinely happy to talk with me. I want to do that again. Now, it's easier when you're in a setting like this to do one-to-ones rather than try to arrange it during the week sometime. So how did it go? Or how did it go? Yes.
Were there more conversation hearts, or were there more anxious, awkward silences? I can tell you about the one that I did this week. In that litany of comments about how you learn something about yourself, I was reminded that I need to work harder on not having a predictable outcome. I went into it thinking that I knew how I wanted it to end, because I was going into this with a person who had some real questions, and I thought I had the answers, right? And I thought, well, surely when I just talk to this person, I will sway them over to my point of view, right? Surely. And that's not the point of a one-to-one at all. The point, but I was getting to know the person. But I left feeling a little bit disappointed because I felt like I didn't answer their questions thoroughly enough, and I wasn't good enough at it. So that's one thing I learned about myself. I also learned that just within any group of 50 people, probably at least 5 of them come from the Midwest. And because this person grew up in the same town that Pastor Allison grew up in, different generations, but they were at Iowa State University when I was there, a couple of years ahead of me, but I probably saw them in a science lab or something at one point. But anyway, we're all over the place, yeah. How about anybody else? Yes?
That doesn't mean in this situation there's probably more than 5.
Yes, that's true. So how did it go? Did anybody do a one-to-one last week and would be willing to share just something that you learned? Not necessarily, okay, remember confidentiality. Remember, the only story you are okay to tell is your own story. So when I reported back on my one-to-one, I talked about what I learned for me and general things. So what did you, first of all, if you did a one-to-one last week, you learned that you did one. You could do it. You didn't go into a puddle of ooze when you did that. Anybody willing to share anything that came out of that for you? Fran.
I didn't say we're going to have a one-to-one relationship for an hour. What I did was ask a couple who live in Beaverton Lodge also to sit down and have dinner with us, as we do anyway. So we were together about 45 minutes, and I told her that we'd had the Sunday school class where we enjoyed learning about other people and all. And these folks were from Washington State, and one had been Lutheran all his life and talked about the family gatherings after church with his grandmama up in, what's the name of that town? Papalio? No. And the wife had started out Methodist and I think dabbled in Catholic and came to this church when they moved here, I think after trying another one. Found out the career of one, the forestry agency, and dental hygienist. And I don't know whether it was that time or we talked another time why she had not been coming to church. And then I let her know the Sundays where she objected to something here would not occur, and so she came. Yeah, so I enjoyed interviewing them, I guess. And Ted did the same.
Yeah, we did it jointly, 2-2.
2 to 2, it works just as well, divide it by 2, and then that's just fine. Yeah, so I love that. And so now, the next time you get together, you could probably go deeper. And you could probably follow up with a question like, when you're thinking about the experience that you've had in other churches that have been awful for you, where does that come from? What feeling is that invoking? So I'll think of an example of something that makes me uncomfortable. And this is just me. I don't really like the trap set, all the drums with the just because when I was a teenager, the hot church to go to was the one that had the rock and roll band. And the kids that went to that church were the poorest behaved kids in the world. They were the ones who were smoking and drinking and doing, I don't know what else. But anyway, so that just it's an association for me. So that's where that comes from, is a long, deep-seated gut reaction to that. Now, we are going to have a trap set in church. We're going to have drums in church. Yeah. And will I walk out? No. But it helps me to understand that that's where I'm coming from, and that's why I have that reaction, and I can deal with it then. So, okay, anybody else?
Well, the conversation I had was with someone from the Midwest, and we were talking about the cultures of growing up in the 1950s. And it was the same in the Pacific Northwest. Lutherans all went to Lutheran church, and we would always, every Sunday we'd go to Sunday school and church, and communion then was for us only once a month, and you had to be confirmed in order to take communion. So it was much more formal then. And also then on Sunday, the best meal of the week was Sunday afternoon. When we had, roast beef or baked chicken or fried chicken or whatever, and how that really doesn't happen too much these days. So that was my, okay.
Well, thank you, those of you who are brave enough to share, thank you. And for everyone, this is not a class that ends after the 5 weeks. You could do one-to-ones forever, and in fact, we will give you another challenge for next week if you choose to accept it. But we're not going to kick anybody out of class for not doing their homework, so no worries. So you may be wondering, or maybe you wondered before the first session, why is it that we need to learn this stuff? Why do we need to learn to be a relational culture? Back in the good old days, like Larry was talking about with the church, and I grew up in a state where everybody went to church somewhere. I think we had one Jewish family, but if you weren't Catholic, you were Lutheran or Methodist or Presbyterian, or what was the Assemblies of God was the big hoorah church back then. So everybody went something. And I'm old enough to remember a time when there were three main sectors of society that made decisions for the country and for the world, actually. And back in those days, there was the civil sector, so that's all of us. There was the government, and then there was the market sector. And the three of those sectors were roughly equal in power and authority and size and voice. So that when decisions got made here in the center, the interests intersected between the civil and the government and the market sectors. Where those intersected, that's where decisions were made. How would you say things are now? One big circle? Well, we've got the government, right? Although I should have made this smaller after the last 6 weeks, but yeah. And then there's the market. And where do you think the civil sector is now in terms of power and authority and decision making? And it's smaller. And it's not even in the circle. In many cases, we have the civil sector don't have a seat at the table. And that's what we're trying to change. Now, the problem with that, you might say, well, what's the problem with that? Because as long as those other people make all the decisions, we elect them, they're fine, they'll do what they need to do. Well, here's the problem. Back in the day, when we did have three sort of equal sectors in decision making, the civil sector was rimmed with what are called mediating institutions. This is when I learned to speak more slowly because I can't say mediating really fast. So, mediating institutions. And what a mediating institution is someplace like a church, a Grange Hall, a PTA. It's an organization that mediates or helps buffer the pressures from the other sectors and helps people deal with them when they don't have the means themselves. So when Pastor Allison was talking about the 2 trees today and making a lot of money, and that's a really good thing, but there are some people who don't have those skills. The skill I was blessed to, or cursed to give was, I really like to teach. Well, no teacher in the planet makes a 3-figure salary. Well, maybe the principals do, but teachers are not known for their high salaried jobs, right? Had I been blessed to be a software engineer, that may have been different. Okay, so there are so we need mediating institutions. If I was born with really poor eyesight. If I didn't have glasses when I was younger, I wouldn't be able to see. So people back in the day, before the internet, before TV, before all of this, people will belong to an organization that would support them when they needed help, that would buffer them from the outside forces, and those are called mediating. So what are some of them? So I mentioned churches, Grange Halls, PTAs, what's another one? Unions, yes, unions. Well, those forces are all shrinking now with the shrinking of the civil sector. So they provide a buffer for the forces, for the pressures that come in from other areas. With the shrinking civil sector, mediating institutions also have a shrinking ability to do the work that they need to do. And so a relational culture increases an institution's ability to be a mediating institution. So we go from just, the plain circle to a big, dark, fat circle, and with a lot of padding. So that's what we're aiming for with the relational culture, because society doesn't do it naturally to the extent that it used to. I mean, it used to be that the only way you could see your neighbors is if you went to the Grange Hall or the town meeting. And now, we stay in our homes and watch TV. Okay, any questions or thoughts about that before I go on? Okay. When a one-to-one is a really good way to find an intersection of public and private interests. Now, what do I mean by that? A private interest is, I can't find an affordable apartment. Now, that fortunately is not true for me, but I know it's true for a lot of people in my orbit. I know a couple of people who are working 2 and 3 jobs, and they can't find a decent place to live on their own. They still have to live with 4 or 5 other people. And so here's an example. One bedroom with a balcony, oh boy, in central Beaverton, 702 square feet. How big is our living room? Do you remember? Yeah, 702 square feet, yes, yeah.
I live in a 1-bedroom in central Beaverton with no balcony. It is $1,750 a month.
Yeah. Yeah, and this one is proudly advertising for $1,949 per month. Because they have a balcony. So I suppose you could call that a second bedroom, because you could sleep on the balcony. Almost $2,000 a month to live in a 1-bedroom apartment in Beaverton. This is not New York City, this is Beaverton. So that's my private thing. So what happens when you internalize that, if you think that it's all because of you, I don't make enough money, I don't make enough Lego sets, I don't make the right Lego sets, I must be lazy, there's something wrong with me. My parents had a house by the time they were my age. Why can't I afford a house? There must be something wrong with me. That's the private thing, and that's the hopelessness that we can feel. guess what? There is a public dimension to that. There's also a public. The fact is, our area has a shortage of affordable housing. And it's not just Beaverton. It's Portland. It's the whole Tri-County area. So you see where these two intersect. So there's a private dimension and a public dimension to the same issue of affordable housing. Where those two intersect is where there's energy. And with energy, you can affect change. So our goal in doing these relational meetings is to find out where these private issues are. What are people really thinking about, worrying about? What pressures are on them? Another example is that I can't afford a car. And once again, this is not me. I can't afford a car, but I need to get around. That's my private thing. The public part of that is public transportation in this part of the world is really awful. It's really awful. You go to Europe, and oh my gosh, you don't need a car. Even New York City, you don't need a car. Yeah.
You can't safely get to this church on Tri-County.
Yes.
All right.
You can take the bus 20 to Butner Road,
Yeah.
but you have to walk down Butner Road with no sidewalk. So people can't safely get to us.
Yeah. And especially, so what she said for the folks at home is that you cannot safely get to St. Andrew with public transportation. And, yeah, which is true. Which is true. And Casey knows that because for the first couple of weeks that you lived here, bless your heart, you would come to choir practice at Wednesday nights, or bell practice Wednesday nights, in the rain, in the dark, with no sidewalks to walk on, and we were all worried about her. But so now you have a car, so we're okay, but still. So that's that's private and public. So where that intersects is a potential for energy, a potential for change. When we do training about this aspect, let's see, did anybody go to the orientation that was in here? Yeah, oh, you did. Okay, good. So you remember the video that we showed, the ASRA video? We show a video about a woman in Australia who was having trouble, long story, I'll shorten it, was having trouble. She didn't have a car, she needed to use public transportation, which was adequate, but the trains were all up a whole bunch of stairs. Well, then she hurt her leg. And so she had trouble accessing the stairs. And then she looked around and she saw, oh my gosh, that woman's in a wheelchair. She can't get up there either. And that person is really old and can't get up there either. This one has a couple of kids. They can't get up all those stairs. And so eventually she joined with others and she found out that there were a lot of people who had this issue. They got together, they figured out who has the authority to do something about that. They did their lobbying, they did their due diligence, and they got an elevator installed at the train station. Yeah. Public versus private, public intersecting with private. Now, when people in a faith community like this one, if we discover our private interests and discover that, oh, St. Andrew has a thing for that. When we came to this church, I really, really loved singing in choirs. And so it was important to me to be in a church that had a choir, and this one did. So my private interest was met by the public ministry of the church. Can you think of another example of somehow that somebody might have a private interest that could be met by something that St. Andrew is doing in a public way? Go around. Yeah. So think about somebody who has a private interest that could be fed with a St. Andrew ministry.
I used to serve a church that didn't have any gender-neutral bathrooms, and we hired a non-binary staff member who then didn't have a place to go to the bathroom at church. And so that's something I look for when I visit a church, to see if they have a gender-neutral bathroom. And so that's like something that person needs. Like, they need to go to the bathroom. That's pretty private.
Yeah.
But there's a public dimension of that.
Good, yes. And that was one thing that when we did the remodel, because we never used to have that either. when we did the remodel, that was a high value for St. Andrew, to have that option. Luann, I think you said something. Or was it, yeah.
Gretchen said it, but.
Oh, sorry.
Both care. So I have a personal passion for ensuring that our earth is a healthy place for us to live, and St. Andrew's Earth Care Ministry meets that, and it's certainly is a good passion for me.
Mm-hmm. That's perfect. Anybody else? Yeah, Sue.
The RIC component is important to me personally, and in a public way, I'm really happy that St. Andrew chooses to be representative in Pride parades.
Just so you know, Pastor Allison, it's tradition that the pastor marches with us in the Beaverton parade with the collar on.
She was here last year.
Oh, you were here last year. Oh, that's right, I forgot. Sorry. I was there too, I forgot. See, the brain is full of holes, what can I say? Yes. Yes. Yes, okay. Anybody else? Dan?
I just want to make a couple comments. We're talking about the availability of decent housing for people. And I've been involved with Habitat for 25 years. And there were two affiliates. There was one in Beaverton, West Side, and Portland. And they merged last year. So this year, I'll just give you a little background. We're building or repairing 170 houses in the metropolitan area and trying to make affordable housing for families that aren't getting pushed into a 700 square foot apartment and trying to make a go of it or pay for it even.
Yeah.
And so it's really, it's quite a change, and that's one of the things that caused me to get involved with them.
That's an excellent example. A private need of, you need housing, a public dimension of a bunch of people who want to help people get housing. Hopefully that will not be too impacted with the current administration budget cuts. That's one that I'm watching really carefully. But the other thing is that the two organizations who were doing similar work realized that they were stronger together and more efficient together, so that's good. Okay.
With one of the other Beaverton Lodge residents, I went to her Aloha Methodist Church, and they had been struggling, but they donated part of their land for the Washington County Housing Group to put 30 pods there for the homeless. And they went through hell to get the neighbors to accept that. They had to stop a meeting midstream because there was such animosity toward it. But the church has not only allowed them to use the land, but has started a clothes closet in the church for them and a food pantry for them, and there's a computer that they can use for looking for work. And they've had potlucks, which include those in the pods as well as the church getting to know one another. Now, according to the limits, I guess, of the Washington County Authority, they cannot have it more than one more year. I think it's a 3-year program. So they will need to have another place that's willing to give up some of their land to have the pods.
There is a bill before the Oregon legislature right now that is being championed and led by the Levin and Salt and Light community. They have, it's part of the sacred organizing too, I think. They have a land and housing room in sacred organizing. And there is a bill before the Oregon legislature that would allow faith communities to use their land for affordable housing. Because there are other churches who want to do that as well. And they're coming up against zoning problems. And so this is, when we go to Salem on April 7th, that may be something that we may be advocating for. So you're absolutely right. Okay. Anything else?
I have a rental comment.
Yes.
From 50 years ago, 1975, I was able to rent an apartment in Northwest Portland and 21st and Johnson studio for $125 a month. Of course, that was only 50 years ago. 50 years ago, and in that time, if you earned the minimum wage, you could still afford a studio apartment.
Yeah, and that's part of the issue, is that there are a lot of us who were alive back then. When I went to Iowa State University back in the early 70s, it was $500 a quarter for tuition and room and board. My really expensive chemistry textbook was, I think, $20. So, but we had this mindset that, well, I could work a minimum wage job and pay that, right? Yeah, but you can't now. You can't now. Okay, so as we continue, I want you to think about what private interests people at St. Andrew have that could be intersected with the public interests that St. Andrew is already working on. So just keep that in your mindset. And I'm going to pass it back to Larry.
What does this mean for a faith community? And the paper comes up here.
Oh, actually, I'm going to do this. I'll do the slides for you. Go
Okay,
ahead. No, go ahead. You talk.
Okay. How does discovering people's self-interest help them find their passion for ministry?
So that's pretty much what I said. Okay, there we go. That's what yours is.
Okay.
Okay, I have to do a little magic, so
Okay.
you talk. No, you talk.
Oh, okay.
You talk. Just gotta do this. Oh, shoot. I discovered that I have to download this so we can actually see it. So let me download this. So think about what's in the weekly news. Gosh, I can't see. Yep. Come on. I know. If I were computer competent, I would be able to do this.
You can see it up here.
Can you see it? Okay. Let me do this. Trying to be earth-friendly here. I was going to bring in a bunch of copies of it, and I thought, well, why not just do it on the screen? Okay. All right. You go.
Okay, so what kinds of articles are there in the weekly news?
And you can scroll down and see.
Which way?
So what's one kind of article that is in the weekly news? You all read it. I know you all read it.
There she is.
Opportunities to join a group or come to an event. What else? What other kinds of things are in there?
There's always a climate-related article in the weekly news. Just this Composers for Women's History Month. So for people who are musicians, or people who appreciate music, there's that connection.
So there are, well, what other kind of categories are there? Can you scroll down a little bit, Larry? And, yeah, there we go. Keep going. Keep going.
A little more.
There we go. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Here.
There's usually opportunities for service,
Yes.
Donating to the food train or many things.
Okay, can you get down to the last page? Let's keep going. So we have all of these opportunities to participate, to do the Bonhoeffer seminar that Pastor Mark is going to be leading, and then stop there. Yes, can you stop there? And then at the end, we have our prayer list. Always a prayer list. And then at the very, very end, we have the calendar.
Calendar, yeah.
So if you want to come over to church and you want to meet somebody here and have a meeting with 50 people, you can look at that and say, oh, sorry, that room is busy that day. So then the next question is, okay, I can get rid of this.
Okay.
Ask them the next question. That's on the thing.
Okay. Do you read everything completely in the weekly news? Do you read the weekly news? Okay.
Oops, sorry. Sorry. Too many tabs open. I love computers. Yes, I do. I love computers. How about you?
Or you want to go to the one-to-one question?
Yeah, but first I want to
Okay.
just ask him what. But that's not what well, okay. You wanted to see these again anyway, didn't you? I know you did. Fast.
I can't read that fast.
Well, it's a good thing you heard it before then. There you go. Yeah, they.
Yeah, well, I got one, but first of all, I couldn't find a link
Oh.
listed anywhere, so I used the previous links, and all I got was like YouTube history stuff.
Okay, so thank you for that. Yeah, well. So what do you actually read in the weekly news? What kind of article attracts your attention?
Tongue in cheek. If I have sent an article in, I always check to be sure that it's there.
That's fair.
In need of prayers.
Okay, so the prayer list.
I check the weekly calendar to see if I've forgotten something.
Anybody else? Oh, Jane.
I like to read Liz Hardy's article, but I don't know what it's called.
Climate Corner.
The Climate Corner, I guess that's what it's called. I skip headlines apparently, and I just read the article. But there you go.
Yes. Yeah. That's okay, Jan. I skip the articles and read the headlines. So, yeah. Anyway, I know, right? So, but the point is that you don't read everything in the weekly news. So, Larry, set us up for our one-to-ones.
Okay, so it's time to pair up for one-to-ones.
Hold on 1 second.
Wait,
Sorry. Late breaking news.
Oh.
Yeah, I read the weekly news to pick out articles that I can put on the website front page under in the spotlight events at St. Andrew. I get little articles for the website from the weekly news, and I try to pick out articles that may be interesting to people who are church shopping. So that if somebody is scanning our website, they might think, gee, those people sound like an interesting bunch. I think I want to check them out.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to dig a little deeper here.
okay. So one-to-ones can be a useful tool for helping people find their passions for ministry. Let's see.
Next slide, Larry.
What?
Next slide.
Okay. When you read the weekly news, which articles do you read in full? Which events are compelling enough to bring you back to church on an evening or a weekend?
Question? Yeah. This is a real question. Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, okay, we're going to do it in one-to-ones.
yeah.
Oh, no, sorry. No, we are going to do one-to-ones now, and then we'll come back and share, and then I'm interested. No, that's okay, because I'm going to be honest, it takes a lot to get me back here once I go home. It has to be something pretty compelling to get me back here, So find somebody that you haven't spoken to much. I know we're all friendly here, we all know each other. But find somebody who you don't know very well, and let's see, how much time do we have for this, Larry?
10 minutes, is that?
10 minutes?
Is that?
Yeah, that'd be fine.
Yeah.
So let's do like we did last week and spend 5 minutes with one person talking and one person listening. And then we'll give you the 5-minute warning and then switch and have the other person talk and the other person listen.
Are we ready?
It's hard to stop
Yeah.
mid-sentence, isn't
Yeah.
it?
So how did it go on these?
Thumbs up, middle down?
Okay.
Oh, okay.
And then are you making any connections on how all this might be good for St. Andrew?
So how could finding, if you had this conversation with somebody else, hey, have you read the weekly news? What articles do you actually read? How might that strengthen our St. Andrew community? Can you think of a way? Oh, other side. I'm going to wear different shoes next week.
It might bring their attention to something that they hadn't noticed.
We might find commonality of interest.
Yeah, did you find any common interests with the person you were talking to? Did it surprise you maybe a little bit? Yeah. Go back to the question that I had for you the first week. When have you gone to a memorial service and heard something about someone and say, I wish I'd known that? Right? What if we could learn that before somebody died? I'm interested also, sorry Larry, didn't mean to steal your thunder. I'm interested in what types of articles people read stem to stern. I know Sue reads the whole thing, which I think is marvelous. I think it's marvelous. What are some of the categories of articles that really grab your attention? What do you always read about?
The prayers.
The prayers. And how does that strengthen our St. Andrew community?
Well, I want to know who's in need of some extra support.
Yeah. Yeah, seeing them and praying for them and. Oh. I know. I was swinging my arms.
And I'd like to say it from the other side, when your name is on the prayer chain, and then you receive a card from somebody that you really don't even know quite that well, but that's happened to me, and it just makes you feel so good that you're being prayed for, and that you receive this encouraging card.
Right, and then when you come to church and you see that person, you have a connection with that person, and maybe you feel a little bit differently. When you go up to communion with them, you're eating at the same table with them. It's a connection between those people. What other kinds of articles do you read all of? Yeah, Casey. Sorry, I cut you off earlier. That's okay. There you go.
I always read the music articles because I like when people are in different music groups that I can go see. And I think that's a connection you can make with someone to show if someone cares enough about their own concert to put it in the announcements, then I think they would also care that someone from church comes to see them. Because Gretchen came to my concert and I cared.
And then I'll come to Bill.
I was saying that I read the articles, I kind of skip from one to the other. I ping pong from one article to the next, so I don't read it straight through. But the one right now at this particular point in time, I'm reading the Earth News because there's always something there that I hadn't thought of, and that gives me a chance to incorporate a new behavior.
I think it's important that we have these and we take home, because while I'm at church, I might read a third of it, but having it at home, then you look at it later and you look at virtually all the articles, and pretty much we'll read all of it. It gives you some ideas that you didn't even think about, but I think having it a physical thing. Now, granted, we can go in like Steve would do, maybe into the website and look at it, but it's not as convenient. An old person like me, you like to turn pages.
Yeah.
You're not alone in that.
Yeah.
You are not alone, yes. Although I do enjoy reading them on Fridays. And I read to make sure that I'm not doing anything on Sunday, because I forget. So can you see how as you're having these conversations with people, if they say, I really love to go to concerts, or I went to this great concert last week, and it was great. I'm sure it was, yeah. I was going to go, but I forgot. But there was this great symphony orchestra that played. Oh, you like the symphony? I do too. I think there's something coming up. Let's go.
Another thing that's really helpful is, for instance, the in-gathering. They always produce a list of things that are needed, and so I know what I need to, what strikes me I would like to find. And let me tell you something, diaper pins are really hard to find.
Dollar store? Okay, anybody else have a good source for diaper pins? Okay, that's good to know, good to know. Anything else? Are you sort of getting the idea of how this could strengthen our community a little bit? Are you getting the idea about how conversations like this might even lead to new ministries that we're not doing yet? Right? And if you have a conversation with somebody and they say, you know, I really love to do community-wide art projects. Great. Now, of course, the danger of that is then when you say, would you head that up? Then they go, yeah. So you have to be careful about that. But maybe there's an interest, like I'll use Tira as an example. Tira has an interest in, first of all, building community, but also in helping people understand the value of eating a plant-based diet and how that is healthy and how that promotes health. But mostly she wanted to get people together, so she figured out a way to do her Nourishing Conversations initiative, and it was quite popular, as I understand. So.
And there was an article about the property committee needing volunteers.
Yes. Yeah, so when you talk to people who say, I love to work outside. You know, I love pulling weeds. I love building things. Say, well, we have a property team that could really use your help. No, what? No, I didn't say I do. No, I'm very much a fair weather gardener. But darn, I have a meeting at noon. So. Okay. Come on. There we go. So, any overall thoughts or questions or concerns or... Okay. I'm kind of wondering how close are we coming to talking about developing skills for what you thought you were going to be learning how to do here? You don't have to answer that, but I'm just curious about that. Okay, so we have another challenge for you. This week, we would love it if you would find someone to have a one-to-one with. And I'm even going to say this doesn't even have to be a St. Andrew person. This can be somebody, one of your friends. It can be anybody. The prompt is, what pressures are affecting you or your loved ones these days? What pressures are impacting your lives? So, for example, I'm getting older, and as I get older, I have health issues that pop up from time to time. And it's becoming increasingly difficult for me to see my doctor, who I have had a relationship with for a very long time. But to get an appointment with her, it's 3 weeks out. Well, by that time, I'll either be better or dead. And so, you know, it used to be in the old days that we could go to urgent care. Well, even urgent care, you need appointments for these days. And if I need to see a specialist, it's 6 months out, 12 months out, whatever. And I've been reading that it's getting more and more difficult for doctors, for physicians to practice in the current climate because of the way our system is working. So, you know, that was an issue when I was younger, but not as much as it is now that I'm old. And things are starting to not work anymore. So that's one example of a pressure. Another one is the housing thing that we talked about. Both of our children, our son was able to buy a house last fall that was the same size as the house my parents bought when I was 6, but for a lot more money and needed a lot more fixing up. My daughter and her new husband would love to buy a house. I'm not sure they can. And by the time when we were their ages, we were on our 3rd house by then, our 3rd house. And we weren't atypical. They'll be lucky, my daughter and son-in-law live in the Seattle area, and they'll be lucky if they could find something that they can afford. So, as you're talking with people, and a lot of people have a lot of different pressures, just ask, what's keeping you up? What's weighing on you? What is really what makes life difficult for you these days? Any questions about that? Thank you. We have 2 more weeks left. Thank you for coming out on spring break. I appreciate it. And we'll see you next week.